So if we look at the parts, we're going to look at various stages. So in a chicken egg, we have about 3 weeks. From time that egg is laid until it's about ready to hatch is about 21 days. Okay. So at the beginning stages, the embryo is very small. So you see there a tiny little embryo. The yolk is still there. It's in the middle of the egg, surrounded by the albumin. And then some additional parts form. One is called the allantois, and the other is called the amnion. We'll talk about what these do in a second. So the embryo obviously is the developing chick. It starts off as a single cell, the blastoderm, which can begin to grow and divide after fertilization. Starts as a single cell and then splits into 2 and 4 and 8 and so forth. The allantois is an organ that's used for gas exchange. So we know that this embryo, in order to grow, in order to get the nutrients and the energy it needs oxygen. And we also know that it's going to produce waste, carbon dioxide. And the allantois helps with this gas exchange. Helps remove waste gas, carbon dioxide, and take in oxygen. The amnion is this layer surrounding the embryo. And it is a protective layer. It's filled with fluid. And it acts as an additional shock absorber so that the embryo doesn't get harmed if the egg gets moved around a lot. If we look a little later on in the development, as the embryo has gotten larger, the parts are basically the same. You have the embryo, you have the amnion. Down here would be the yolk membrane that surrounds the yolk. Here is the allantois. Then you see these lines here. What do you think those are? Or what do you think their purpose is, their function? I don't know.
Get nutrients from the yolk to the chick.
Yeah. So we know that the embryo is going to use the yolk for energy, but it's not eating it. You know, it's not chewing up the yolk and swallowing a little bit each day to get energy. It's absorbing the fats and vitamins and minerals directly into its body through these vessels. They're called yolk vessels. Okay, and at the top, there are also vessels for gas exchange, called allantois vessels. And so these move material back and forth. Joe?
So, you told us that when the chick, like its bone structure is used as a shell, then how come when the chick is coming out that the yolk?
Yeah, because the shell gets dissolved and it gets thinner and thinner, but not completely dissolved. So it gets thinner and thinner, so it's easier for that chicken to break out, or that bird to break out. We're not just talking about chicken. Now, if we look at the stages, as you go from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 days, obviously each stage along, the embryo grows larger. The embryo gets more and more developed. The yolk over time, as the embryo uses up those nutrients, it becomes smaller. Okay, it gets a little more crowded. The albumin gets less as the embryo absorbs protein from it. And so eventually, the end stages, basically all that's in there is the chick. Its beak, as it gets towards the end of its development, its beak turns to face the air sac, pokes in there at the very end to take its breath, and then starts to work its way out of the shell. Yep, Nicole?
Is the chick fuzzy when it's in the
it has feathers, but they're kind of wet. Like when you see a newly hatched chick, they're kind of wet, and it takes a little while for their feathers to dry. Yep. Sometimes all of the yolk has not been absorbed into the chick, and the yolk sac is still attached once in a while. Olivia?
The
Atlantic vessels, yep.
Are those like just for the chick to breathe, and then if the air sac is different, it's like?
Yeah, the air sac is for it to actually inhale. That it's used to absorb oxygen from the outside. All right, just one other fact. Somebody last class, you don't have a slide, it's just sort of a general interest. Last class, somebody asked, do people ever eat fertilized eggs? And yeah, they do.
Yeah, so a video. It's so good.
So a fertilized, it's a common food, especially in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Laos.
They're so good.
And so it's called balut, and it's basically a fertilized and partially developed duck or chicken still in its shell. And you know, they're eaten in a variety of ways. They're cooked like a hard-boiled egg, so they're boiled and then eaten. In different countries, different areas, eat them at different stages. In some places they're eaten earlier on, where the embryo is not as well developed. In other places, they're eaten very late on, so it's basically fully developed inside. Sometimes it's eaten straight out of the shell. They crack the top, drink the fluid inside, and then eat the inside, the embryo and the yolk parts with a spoon. Other times it's served with soy sauce or vinegar. They're served on the street in a little kiosk.
That's so bad.
Balut Express. So it may seem strange to us, but it's basically it's chicken. It's just eating a chicken at a different stage in development. So they look like,
Yeah, they look like that.
you crack off the top. You may sip out the broth from inside, and then eat the contents, the inside. You know, generally the bones aren't fully calcified yet, so they're not like hard and crunchy that you're going to choke on, but still somewhat softer. And basically eat the insides. And, it's common food in lots of places.
China.